doing enthralled to that pig of a king?
The world seems simple to you, my friend, but when you're a king, very few choices are simple.
Troy from 2004 is a movie that's been on my watch list for some time. A grounded take on Homer's epic poem piqued my interest, and I find the story of a long, drawn-out war over the most beautiful woman to be a captivating premise. Not only was I curious how much it would divert from the original source material, but I really wanted to see Brad Pitt as Achilles. And after sitting through it, all I can say is it's fine. There's a lot of awesome scenes and moments in this movie, but at the same time, there's also frustrating decisions that hold me back from fully loving this film. So without further ado, let's cut to the chase and talk about the highs and lows of Troy. Performances for the most part are all good, and it's funny that Brad Pitt wasn't a fan of his acting ability in this. However, his cold demeanor didn't bother me and it felt appropriate for the character. There's a couple of scenes where I can understand wanting another take, but he does embody the role very well. Brian Cox as Agamemnon has such a blast being this annoying and despicable ruler. Peter O'Toole as Priam is excellent casting. He has such a calm presence as the king. Though I agree with Achilles,
You're a far better king than the one leading this army.
Priam's greatest flaw is that he places his trust in the wrong people and doesn't listen to his sons.
We're making a mistake.
Prepare the army.
Also, I do need to gush about Sean Bean as Odysseus for a little bit because though his role is limited in this film, he leaves such an impact. He's got great chemistry with Achilles, he invokes so much presence whenever he's on screen, and if the movie reduced his role any further, I think we miss out on a vital perspective of the war.
In this war, you're a servant.
Sometimes you have to serve in order to lead.
I enjoyed his character so much that I would have loved to have seen a sequel to Troy and it to be a Sean Bean-led Odyssey film. That would have been so cool. As for the interpretation, it's one that is intriguing, especially with some of the changes they make in order for it to be grounded. The power struggle between Agamemnon and Achilles, for instance, is one of the more memorable conflicts of this film. I was even pleasantly surprised by how fair the movie was when it came to its screen time. Both sides get the right amount of time to shine, and it never felt like one side was getting more spotlight than the other. I thought there was enough time for the audiences to get invested and be conflicted on who to root for. However, the theme that stuck out in my mind was the uncertainty of the gods' role in this story. The dramatic tension there is handled so well, especially for those who believe in the gods like Hector, and getting to see his faith tested is so much fun. You've got Achilles making fun of the god he serves, and he doesn't get struck down by Apollo, but instead lives, and he has to hear that his battle strategy will be decided
based on bird signs.
Hector, show respect.
Like, that is just hilarious. But that question about whether the gods are listening and if they even care is a theme I enjoyed seeing unfold. I also can't forget to mention the scope of the movie. Now, I wasn't impressed with the armies battling one another, but thinking about the amount of planning that must have gone into this and seeing a lot of these beautiful shots accompanied by Horner's epic score makes a lot of these moments very memorable for me. And though I mentioned that I wasn't impressed with the armies fighting one another, I do think that the one-on-one fights were far more impressive and engaging. I am going to talk about Hector and Achilles' fight a bit later, but one of the fights that I was most fond of was Paris and Menelaus's. It's not just the shots, the choreography, the thematic tension of the scene, or even the reaction shots from the crowd that makes this moment so great. Honestly, I'm just a simple guy, and I liked seeing Paris get humiliated. That being said, the best fight is Hector and Achilles, who have such a great payoff. I mean, you know where it's going, especially for those who know the story, but I can't be the only one who was hoping that Hector would come out on top at the end. The thing is, from the very second they fight, you see Achilles in full control, and he's toying with Hector. It is heartbreaking because the MVP of this movie, for me, is Hector. He's the best written character, super relatable as the family man who cares for everyone, and is consistently trying to do the right thing. He is forced into his brother's war, and though he knows Paris is wrong, he doesn't abandon him. Hector's honor and righteous outlook is what makes him the greatest hero of this film. Granted, I don't know if this character would be as captivating if not for Eric Bana's performance. Seriously, he has some of my favorite reactions in this film, and once he dies, his absence is noticeably felt, which leads me to the lows. Right out of the gate, I wanted to talk about the lackluster characters, and some of them are accompanied by lame duck performances that drag this movie down. Those in particular are Helen and Paris, who are by far my least favorite characters. They're not captivating, I don't find their naive love charming, but rather annoying.
The gods will curse us, but I love you.
If that was the goal, like mission accomplished, it's just frustrating to watch. And I have to agree with Menelaus, like, Helen, you left to be with this guy? But why? And speaking of Menelaus, he's not that great of a character either. Leeson feels wasted in this role, and all I wanted was more screen time with him. At least it would make his death feel more impactful when we get around to it, and he wouldn't feel like an underdeveloped character. The only other outlier is Patroclus, who's a nothing burger and has a weak sauce performance attached to him. I know he shouldn't bother me, but because his death has such a huge impact on the story, and we get this visceral reaction from Achilles, it kind of comes across as empty and forced. And same could be said for a lot of other plot points in this movie. Like Achilles' romance with Briseis, I just don't buy their romance, and I wouldn't even hate elevating this relationship or Achilles' motivation at the end. Except there was no chemistry between them, and they're just two good-looking people making out. So as we reach the climax and Achilles' mindset shifts from glory to love, it's a letdown because of how underdeveloped their romance is. Another change that I don't particularly care for is Paris and Helen living at the end. This is such an unsatisfactory conclusion, and possibly if those two were more likable and stronger overall, I could get on board with this change. However, I was far more excited to see them get their comeuppance, and it just never happened. One of my other issues is that the pacing isn't stellar, and the movie drags from time to time. There's a lot of focus shots that could have been trimmed down. Specifically, I'm thinking of some points in the middle where it feels unnecessarily long. The only other point I want to mention, and it's more of a nitpick, it doesn't affect my rating. Troy, I do think, is a decent movie that I enjoy almost 2/3 of, and the highs of the movie do overshadow most of the negatives. However, I would have liked it if they hadn't minimized the gods role, and instead they explored their perspective. I think there's a way of having that great theme that I mentioned about the question of faith, while also showing the gods working in the background and seeing how selfish they are. To me, I think that the gods are a fun perspective to shine light on, and I do hope to see not only an adaptation of the Iliad with a less grounded take, but to have even other mythological tales not shy away from the fantastical elements. Last thing before I sign off, though I have my concerns about Nolan's new Odyssey film, there is a part of me that is excited to see him play with some of the fantastical elements. Granted, there is a theory out there that all the giants and such will be an illusion, and it's Odysseus' coping mechanism to why he hasn't been able to get home. I hope that's not the case, but we have to wait and see. And as for Troy, I think it works well enough, and it's a comfortable 6 out of 10 for me. The weaknesses of the movie are notable, but it's the film's themes of pride and faith paired with some strong characters that makes this worth the watch. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on Troy down in the comments below. Like and subscribe. As always, watch, connect, and grow.
The man wants to die.